Jesus. A very good morning to one and all. Today will be our last class in neuro-ophthalmology. Okay. So the topic for today's discussion is optic atrophy. It can be asked as a 4 marks question or as a 2 marks question for you. And even PG entrance bits also they can be asked from this. If my voice is not audible, then please message in the chat box. If it is okay, then clear. Okay. So optic atrophy. Let us see about this today. In last class, we discussed about optic neuritis and papilledema. They are also 4 marks questions and also clinical entities which you see in your daily practice. And then now coming to optic atrophy, this is also one of the common findings in your OPD setup. Okay. So first of all, just a brief review about the recap about the old classes. That is the differences between papilledema, papillitis, and pseudopapilledema. If you are following Khurana textbook, then this table is given in that. So coming to papilledema, I told you the definition wise, it was a swelling of the optic disc which is passive due to raised in intracranial tension. Okay, suppose there is some meningitis or intracranial space occupying lesion, there is edema of the optic disc because of stasis of the axoplasm stasis. It is usually bilateral, but it could be asymmetric. And then the next entity is papillitis. This is usually an active swelling of the disc, usually due to infections or due to trauma or something like that, and it is usually unilateral. It can be seen in demyelinating diseases like multiple sclerosis, etc. And pseudopapilledema, it can be bilateral or unilateral. As the name itself says, it is pseudo. There is disc edema, which is neither due to active causes nor passive causes. So pseudopapilledema means there is disc edema, the disc is swollen, optic disc is swollen, but neither there is any active inflammatory lesion nor there is any raised intracranial tension. It is because of structural anomalies. Suppose just like during some developmental anomalies. So what happens if there is suppose a coloboma of the optic disc or something like that, or else if there is a high refractive error like hypermetropia and there are some refractile bodies present in this optic disc, then also it can be termed pseudopapilledema. So pseudopapilledema is nothing to do with papilledema or papillitis. It is neither an act. It is a disc appears swelling, but it is not a true swelling. It is a structural abnormality due to drusen's or Bergmeister's papilla or high refractive error like hypermetropia in which the fundus appears small. So in papilledema, the visual acuity is normal in early stages except in the atrophic stage. In papillitis, there is a sudden loss of vision over 2 to 8 hours, and the vision loss can maximum go up to 1 week. Usually in 2 to 3 days, the vision loss is complete, but in some people it can go up to 1 week, the vision loss may occur. And in pseudopapillema, there is no vision loss. It depends on the refractive error. In high hypermetropia, what happens is eyeball is very small. So in a small eyeball, the disc looks very edematous because it appears like that because of the structure of the eyeball. It is a structural anomaly. So if it is a high hypermetropia and the disc appears swollen because of high hypermetropia, then depending on the refractive error, there will be the loss of vision. And ocular pain is absent in case of papilledema, but in papillitis, like optic neuritis or retrobulbar neuritis especially, I told you medial rectus and superior rectus muscle fibers are inserted into the meningeal sheaths. So on adduction and elevation, there is some pain. And in pseudopapilledema, there is no ocular pain. And the optical media, that is the vitreous, if you say, it is clear in case of papilledema. In papillitis, there are inflammatory cells like neutrophils in the vitreous. And in pseudopapilledema, again, the vitreous is clear. And optic disc elevation. So there is an instrument called direct ophthalmoscope. In your practical classes, you will be knowing about that in detail. It is difficult to explain in this online class. So in direct ophthalmoscope, if there is a 1 millimeter elevation of the optic disc, the optic disc should actually lie flat over the retina. If there is a 1 millimeter elevation of the optic disc, then there is a 3 diopters of elevation seen in the direct ophthalmoscope. How it happens and all, it is a practical class. So based on the direct ophthalmoscope, in papilledema, the optic disc elevation is up to 2 to 6 diopters. That is 1 millimeter gives rise to 3 diopters. So 6 diopter means it is up to 2 millimeters of elevation. Whereas in papillitis, it is less than 3 diopter, that is less than 1 millimeter. And in pseudopapilledema, depends on the structural anomaly and the refractive error. And in papilledema also, macular star formation can be seen. In papillitis, especially neuroretinitis, in case of neuroretinitis, there will be macular star or macular fan. Macular fan is incomplete star, that is only in few meridians the hard exudates are present. That is called a macular fan. So in papillitis, usually there may be macular fan. In neuroretinitis, there is macular star. In pseudopapilledema, there is no such entity. So these are the differences about papilledema, papillitis, and pseudopapilledema, which can be asked as a question. Next, pseudopapilledema. It is an elevation of optic disc. It looks like papilledema. It can be bilateral or unilateral and asymmetric. Example, optic disc drusen. It is neither due to raised intracranial tension nor due to active inflammation like in case of neuroretinitis or papillitis. It is because of structural anomaly of the disc. Because of some structural abnormality, the disc looks elevated. So what is the structural abnormality? It could either be optic disc drusen. So drusens are small refractile bodies which are present. Just like your amyloidosis, which you have learned in your pathology, it is similar to that. Drusen are small refractile bodies present in the optic nerve. Because of the accumulation of drusen or presence of drusen, the disc appears elevated. In high hypermetropia, I told you eyeball is very small. So when the eyeball is very small, the disc looks to be elevated. And similarly, persistent hyaloid tissue, Bergmester's papilla. And we have seen that Bergmester's papilla on the optic disc and Mittendorf's dot on the lenticular surface, backside of the lens. So this is an actual optic neuritis. So in optic neuritis, there is an elevation of disc. The vessels are engorged and tortuous. There are hemorrhages at the disc margin, and there is also blurring of the disc margins and hyperemic disc. So these are the findings in case of optic neuritis. Whereas this is case of optic disc drusen. See here, you see there are sharp pointed objects. These are nothing but refractile bodies which are present on the optic disc. Because of that, the margins appear blurred, and due to that, we get a false impression that the disc is edematous. Actually, to say here, there is no edema of the disc. It is only these refractile bodies which are present in the optic disc that give a false impression of elevation. Similarly, that is a Bergmester's papilla. I told you persistent hyaloid tissue. So this Bergmester's papilla remains as an attachment. From this, you can think that the disc is elevated, but it is not so. Okay. So coming to optic atrophy, today's topic. So optic atrophy is degeneration of the optic nerve as an end result of damage to axons. Okay. So what is a nerve? A nerve is basically a collection of axons. A collection of axons is known as a nerve fiber. So axons are also known as nerve fibers. A group of nerve fibers or a group of axons put together are known as a nerve. Here it is called optic nerve. Okay. So damage. So what are the nerve fibers? The axons of which cells form the optic nerve? I told you in my initial classes that the retinal ganglion cells. The axons of the retinal ganglion cells or the nerve fibers of the retinal ganglion cells form the optic nerve. So any damage to the retinal ganglion cell axons leads to optic atrophy because the nerve fibers or the axons are formed from retinal ganglion cells. Any damage to this retinal ganglion cells leads to optic atrophy. So from where to where? The damage should occur from retinal ganglion cells up to the lateral geniculate body in order to cause optic atrophy, second order neurons. So what is that? Let us see here. So in that first diagram I told you, so these are the bipolar cells of the retina which form the first order neuron, and these are the retinal ganglion cells which form the second order neurons. So this retinal ganglion cells, this is the cell body, and these are the axons which form the nerve fiber layer. Now these axons, that is these nerve fibers, so these nerve fibers from the retinal ganglion cells, they form the optic nerve. They come to the optic chiasma, they form the optic tract, and finally the end in the lateral geniculate body, that is the synapse here. So in order to optic atrophy to occur, there should be damage to the axons of the retinal ganglion cells. So the axons or the nerve fibers of the retinal ganglion cells have to be damaged in order to cause optic atrophy. So the retinal ganglion cells extend from the retina up to the lateral geniculate body. So the damage to the nerve should take place anywhere here, up to the lateral geniculate body, that is this part where they are synapsing in front of the synapse. So this part there can be a damage, or in the optic tract, or in the optic chiasma, or in the optic nerve, or in the retina itself. So whenever there is a damage to the retinal ganglion cells, that is the axons of the retinal ganglion cells, may it be in the retina or optic nerve or optic chiasma or optic tract or in lateral geniculate body just in front of the synapse. So up to here, that is from this synapse, from here by this point to this point, anywhere, if this retinal ganglion cells axons are damaged, it causes optic atrophy. If there is damage to the axons of optic radiation here, that is above the synapse, there will be no optic atrophy. So remember, the optic nerve is formed by the retinal ganglion cells axons. So any damage to the retinal ganglion cells axons only causes optic atrophy. So the damage should occur anywhere after the synapse from the bipolar cells, that is in retina, up to the lateral geniculate body before the synapse. So only here, if there is a damage to the second order neuron, you will get optic atrophy, or else there won't be any optic atrophy. If this optic radiation is involved, there won't be any optic atrophy. If the bipolar cell is involved, there won't be any optic atrophy. Only if this part is damaged only, you will have optic atrophy. Okay. So that thing you have to remember. So that is the second order neurons, retinal ganglion cells up to the lateral geniculate body. Only if the second order neurons are damaged only, you will get optic atrophy. In other conditions, you won't get optic atrophy. In first class also you had this doubt. I hope you are clear with this. So what is the classification of optic atrophy? So old classification, this is outdated nowadays. It was called primary optic atrophy when there was no ocular pathology. So if there is no ocular pathology, it was termed primary optic atrophy. Example, CNS lesions like Tebisch dorsalis, okay, which infects the ganglion cell layer, that is the second order neurons. Similarly, secondary optic atrophy, if there is any ocular pathology like optic neuritis or papilledema which causes optic atrophy, then it was termed secondary optic atrophy. But this led to a lot of confusions, and this was finally outdated because Tebisch dorsalis is a CNS defect. So in case of when a lesion is present, we can't call it as primary. Actual primary means idiopathic. There should not be any cause. That's why this classification is outdated, because there is some cause. Some cause can be shown here to be causing the optic atrophy. That's why this was removed. So now we are having two types of classifications. One is ophthalmoscopic classification. That is when you examine with the direct ophthalmoscope or indirect ophthalmoscope. Ophthalmoscopy is the examination of the fundus or examination of the interior of the eyeball. Fundus means interior of the eyeball. So examination of the interior of the eyeball is known as ophthalmoscopy. So it could be primary or simple optic atrophy, consecutive optic atrophy, glaucomatous optic atrophy, post-neuritic optic atrophy, vascular or ischemic optic atrophy. So primary or simple optic atrophy means when there is no cause. So no cause can be pointed out, then it is called primary optic atrophy. Consecutive optic atrophy means secondary to some retinal disorders, just like retinitis pigmentosa or any other inflammatory degenerations of the retina. And similarly, glaucomatous optic atrophy, you all must be thorough by now. It is due to glaucoma, end stage of glaucoma. Post-neuritic optic atrophy, it is due to optic neuritis, neuroretinitis, or retrobulbar neuritis. And vascular or ischemic optic atrophy, it is because of AION. I told you in my previous classes, anterior ischemic ophthalmic neuropathy, arteritic, non-arteritic. So because of that one, it is vascular or ischemic optic atrophy. Okay. So there is one more classification. So this was based on ophthalmoscopic features: primary, consecutive, glaucomatous, post-neuritic, vascular. So in exam, if they ask you a question, make sure that you mention about this ophthalmoscopic classification, because this is what the examiner usually expects. And the other classifications, it could be ascending optic atrophy or descending optic atrophy. So what is this ascending optic atrophy? Damage to ganglion cell layer or retinal nerve fiber layer, and it goes from the eye towards the lateral geniculate body. Whereas descending optic atrophy is from optic tract or chiasma to optic disc. So what is this? We'll see here. So if at all there is some disease, suppose there is a tumor in this pituitary gland which is damaging the nerve fibers in the optic chiasma. So then what happens? The optic atrophy starts at this optic chiasma. Suppose there is a pituitary gland tumor. This pituitary gland tumor is compressing and causing the degeneration of this nerve fibers here. So what that causes is there is degeneration starting at this optic chiasma and going towards the optic disc. So there is a descending optic atrophy, that is from the brain towards the eye it is going. That is a descending type of optic atrophy. Suppose there is some retinal lesion like retinitis pigmentosa or retinal nerve fiber layer damage, then the damage or optic atrophy starts in the retina and goes upwards towards the brain. So when it starts in the retina due to some ocular pathology and goes up, it is called ascending. And when it starts in this optic chiasma or optic tract due to some CNS lesions and it goes down, proceeds downward, then it is known as descending type of optic atrophy. Okay, so ascending means damage to ganglion cell or retinal nerve fiber layer. The damage goes from the eye towards the lateral geniculate body. Whereas descending optic atrophy, it starts in the optic tract or optic chiasma and it goes to optic disc. So this is ascending versus descending optic atrophy. But always remember to write this: primary, consecutive, glaucomatous, post-neuritic, and vascular. This is the most important one which you have to mention. Along with it, if you mention ascending and descending, it is very good. But main is this part, ophthalmoscopic classification. Okay. So now what is this pathology? What is the basic pathological mechanisms going on here? So the nerve fibers degenerate. So when there is the degeneration of nerve fibers, to compensate for this volume loss, glial tissue proliferates. So you all might have been knowing that there will be neuroglia. Neuroglia are a group of supportive tissues. They are like microglia tissue, microglia cells, astrocytes, oligodendrocytes, neurolemma. All these cells are present to support the nervous system. So if there is any damage to the axon, these give the protection part and these give the nutrition support to this. And they also form the scavenging part, that is like macrophages also. So you have glial tissue. So glial tissue consists of so many kinds of tissues like microglia tissue, which take the role of macrophages. Similarly, you have got this oligodendrocytes and astrocytes, which help in formation of myelin sheath and insulation part and all these things. So this glial tissue, what it happens is whenever there is a nerve fiber loss, there is degeneration of the nerve fibers. To compensate for the volume loss, the glial tissue proliferates. That is the protective mechanism here. So here what happens is there is degeneration of the axons, there is proliferation of the glial tissue. Okay. So if the proliferation of glial tissue is more, the disc appears grayish in color, because the glial tissue is usually grayish in color because of the Nissel's bodies and all, whatever it is. So glial tissue give a grayish color. If the proliferation of glial tissue is more, the disc appears grayish in color. If the proliferation of glial tissue is less and degeneration of axons is more, it forms a pale white disc. So the balance between degeneration and gliosis determines the type of optic atrophy it is going into. Okay. So here you see, in case of consecutive or post-neuritic optic atrophy, suppose post-optic neuritis, so due to optic neuritis or due to retrobulbar neuritis or due to papillitis, if there is an optic atrophy, or in case of a consecutive type, that is due to retinitis pigmentosa or any other retinal ebiotrophies or any other retinal degenerations. So if there is a consecutive or post-neuritic optic atrophy, what happens is, first there is degeneration of axons is minimal. There is less degeneration of axons, but gliosis is more. You can see the gliosis is more compared to degeneration. That's why it gives a grayish color tinge to the optic disc. Similarly, in primary optic atrophy, that is where there is no cause can be elucidated or no cause can be detected, the degeneration of axon goes in balance with the gliosis. So the amount of degeneration is same as amount of gliosis. Similarly, in cavernous or ischemic or glaucomatous, ischemic or cavernous means due to AAO, anterior ischemic optic neuropathy and all, the degeneration of axons is more, whereas gliosis is less, because here this is an ischemia. So if you want the glial tissue to proliferate, it should have some blood supply. So because there is ischemia here, the proliferation of glial tissue is less, but the degeneration of axons is more. That's why the disc is pale in color. So why this is important is, this concept will help you in remembering the table which is going to come next. So remember, in optic atrophy, there should always be a balance between this degeneration of the axons and proliferation of glial tissue. If proliferation of glial tissue is more, it gives grayish color tinge to the optic disc. If degeneration of axons is more, it gives a pale white color to the optic disc. That is point number 1. Second thing is, if it is a consecutive or post-neuritic type, the gliosis is more. In primary optic atrophy, both are same. It gives a chalky white disc. In cavernous, that is ischemic and glaucomatous, degeneration is more compared to gliosis. So these things, they will help you. So etiology of optic atrophy. So primary cause is unknown, probably some unknown CNS pathology, but here there is no cause. That is idiopathic. Consecutive means inflammation or degeneration of retina causes GCC loss. That is, it could be retinitis pigmentosa, central retinal artery occlusion, CRAO, or pathological myopia, and many more conditions. Post-neuritic is long-standing papilledema or papillitis, whatever it may be. And glaucomatous. Glaucoma, you all know, chronic elevation of IOP, or it could be normal tension glaucoma also. Similarly, vascular, giant cell arteritis, which is a cause of anterior ischemic optic neuropathy. Similarly, hemorrhagic shock. Due to hypotension, there is a reduced perfusion to the optic nerve. Similarly, anemia and quinine poisoning. Quinine poisoning also causes decreased blood supply. So these are the causes or etiology of optic atrophy. So what are the clinical features? So loss of vision. There could be sudden loss of vision or gradual loss of vision. It could be painless or painful, depending on the condition. So suppose if it is due to optic neuritis. So if it is due to optic neuritis, then it will be painful and sudden loss. If it is papilledema, it is painless and gradual loss. If it is glaucoma, if it is a open angle glaucoma, there might be minimal pain. If it is an angle closure, there will be pain. So depending on the etiology, the vision loss could be sudden or gradual. It could be painless or painful. And the amount of vision loss doesn't correlate with ophthalmoscopic features. That is, your disc looks pale or your disc looks healthy. If the disc looks healthy also, the vision may be less. That is because of some nerve fiber damage. And similarly, pupil, you have got an Marcus gun pupil, RAPD. I told you relative afferent pupillary defect. About this we discussed in brief. That is the swinging flashlight test. Is the connection clear or the connection is okay? Now it is okay. So pupil, there will be relative afferent pupillary defect or Marcus gun pupil. So the direct reflex is absent, but the consensual reflex is present. We discussed about this in detail in our first class. And then there will be visual field loss depending on the sector involved. In case of AION, anterior ischemic optic neuropathy, it is an inferior altitudinal defect is more common. Similarly, if it is a glaucoma, initially the inferior fibers are lost, so there will be a superior field loss. So depending on the condition, okay, there will be the clinical features. So appearance of the optic disc. So finally, you have to remember that optic atrophy is an end result of various diseases like optic neuritis, papilledema, retinitis pigmentosa, CRAO, any glaucoma, any disease can finally end up in optic atrophy. So the clinical features will be of the diseases which are taken into account, okay, or the disease which is causing that. And how will be the disc? It varies based on the amount of gliosis. I told you more amount of the glial tissue proliferation, the grayish color is more. If the glial tissue proliferation is less, it will be pale. So why the disc will be pale? Because of loss of blood supply. Only if the blood supply is present, the disc retains its normal color, that is pale pink in color. So when the blood supply is lost, the disc becomes pale here in case of optic atrophy. So there will be a pale disc. And if there is excessive of gliosis, it becomes grayish in color. If there is no gliosis, it will be pale because of loss of blood supply because of atrophic nerve fibers. And then there will be decreased number of blood vessels. So on the surface of the optic disc, you can see so many blood vessels will be present. So the number of blood vessels will be decreased. So normally there are 10 blood vessels present at the optic disc margin. So if you take the optic disc margin in a healthy person, normally there will be 10 blood vessels at the margins of the optic disc in a normal person. That is known as Kestenbaum's index. So Kestenbaum's index is number of blood vessels present at the optic disc margin, which is normally 10, which is in case of a normal person. And in case of optic atrophy, the number is less. It drops to less than 7 vessels. So if it is less than 7 vessels, then we can call that Kestenbaum's index is reduced. So appearance of optic disc, because of loss of blood supply, it is pale in color. If there is a excessive gliosis, it will be grayish in color. And the number of blood vessels on the surfaces are reduced. That is known as Kestenbaum's index, which is normally 10. And in optic atrophy, it drops to less than 7 vessels. So less than 7 is abnormal, 7 to 10 is the normal value. Okay, now this is an important table which is given in your textbook. So here you have to remember. Here that thing will be very useful for you. So here you see, in primary optic atrophy, the degeneration and gliosis both are same in intensity. That's why the color of the disc is chalky white. So amount of degeneration is proportional to the amount of gliosis. That's why color of the disc is chalky white. In consecutive optic atrophy, what happens? Gliosis is more compared to degeneration. That's why it gives usually a grayish tinge or a waxy yellow tinge. So the grayish here becomes waxy yellow. Just to remember the term waxy yellow. So in consecutive optic atrophy, there is more amount of gliosis, which gives a waxy yellow pallor. So in retinitis pigmentosa, you should remember waxy yellow pallor and arteriolar attenuation and bony corpuscular pigmentation. They are the triad of retinitis pigmentosa. So the waxy yellow color of this disc is present in case of a consecutive optic atrophy. In case of post-neuritic, it is dirty white. In post-neuritic, there is some amount of inflammation. That is, in case of optic neuritis or neuroretinitis, there will be inflammation. In inflammation, there will be release of this polymorphonuclear neutrophils, that is, our neutrophils, thereby leading to some leakage of the proteins and giving to dirty white color. In glaucoma, it is a diffuse pallor, very diffuse pallor. In ischemic type, it is a sectoral pallor. Because I told you, in ischemic means anterior ischemic optic neuropathy. It could be arthritic or non-arthritic. So in optic disc, what happens is, you can take it as that the blood supply is in quadrant wise. So if this optic disc is divided into different zones. So this part is supplied by one branch of the ophthalmic artery. This is by one posterior ciliary artery. This is one short posterior ciliary artery. This is one short posterior ciliary arteries. So the optic disc surface is divided into many sectors. So each sector is supplied by one particular branch of the short posterior ciliary artery, which is in turn a branch of ophthalmic artery. So that particular branch which has been ischemic or which has been affected, only in that particular area of the disc where it supplies, there will be pallor. That is, sectoral pallor is seen in case of ischemic lesions. Okay. And what about the margins of the optic disc? They're well defined in case of primary and consecutive well defined. Post-neuritic blurred margins. You remember in papilledema and optic neuritis, the margins will be blurred. In glaucoma, it is well defined. In ischemic, there will be diffuse pallor. Everything will be diffuse. So surrounding retina is normal in case of primary. In consecutive, there will be the signs of the associated disease. If it is a retinitis pigmentosa, there will be attenuation of the vessels, bony corpuscular pigmentation. If it is a CRAO, cattle tracking of the veins can be seen. So depending on the disease, there may be attenuated vessels or degeneration or other changes depending on the disease. It varies from disease to disease. In post-neuritic, there will be attenuation of the blood vessels and also sheathing around the vessels. The sheathing is because of the inflammatory products which have been released during the inflammation. And in glaucomatous, peripapillary atrophy will be seen. Okay. And in primary, lamina cribrosa is visible. Lamina cribrosa, a sieve-like structure which is present in the sclera at the junction of the eyeball to the optic nerve. And then in consecutive, there is nothing. In post-neuritic, physiological cup is obliterated, so lamina cribrosa is not seen. I told you in papilledema, there is obliteration of physiological cup. In glaucomatous, bean pot sign will be seen. That is the nasal shifting of blood vessels on the optic disc will be there. And the lamina cribrosa will be visible, causing the bean pot sign. And ischemic, that is attenuation of vessels, will be seen. So this is a case of primary optic atrophy. No cause is here known. The disc is appearing chalky white. It is as white as your chalk piece, and the margins are well defined. This is a consecutive optic atrophy secondary to retinitis pigmentosa. Here you can see the disc is waxy yellow in color or waxy pallor, and arterial attenuation. You can see the blood vessels are, this is the veins, and these are the arteries. The arteries are grossly attenuated, very thin, and there is bony corpuscular pigmentation. So this is a consecutive optic atrophy. And this is a post-neuritic, secondary to papilledema. So here you can see the blood vessels are slightly tortuous. They are a bit tortuous here, and little engorged blood vessels, and the margins are also blurred and hazy. That is post-neuritic, and disc appears little bit dirty white in this right eye, but it is not a clear picture. Unless you see directly, you can't see. And then in case of glaucoma, in glaucoma you can see there is nasal shifting of blood vessels and there is peripapillary atrophy. So these are the various things. So what is the differential diagnosis for optic atrophy? It could be a physiological pale disc. So physiological pale disc, how it can occur in infants and elderly, the disc is usually pale. In infants and elderly people, the disc is a bit pale. In axial myopia, as the eyeball is very large, the disc is very large, it may appear a little pale. And similarly, temporal pallor can be seen in case of a large physiological cup. So if there is a large physiological cup also, there can be some temporal pallor. And similarly, pathological pale disc. So optic atrophy means roughly the disc is pale, to say. So what are the causes of pathological pale disc? Optic nerve hypoplasia. We learned about this in our congenital optic disc anomalies. That is the double ring sign and all this. And optic disc bit and coloboma of optic disc. Coloboma means, I told you, congenital absence of any tissue. Congenital absence of any tissue is known as coloboma. So pathological pale disc is seen in case of optic nerve hypoplasia, optic disc bit, and coloboma of optic disc. So these are the differential diagnosis. There is a physiological pale disc and pathological pale disc. So all these things, differential diagnosis is not important for you. You concentrate main on the classification, ophthalmoscopic definition of optic atrophy, ophthalmoscopic classification, as well as that table. That is different features, these clinical features. So this one, if you write, that is enough for you. The rest of the things are not that much required, and etiology is also. Okay. So that is about optic atrophy. So optic atrophy definition will be like this: degeneration of the optic nerve as an end result of damage to axons of retinal ganglion cells up to the lateral geniculate body, or simply you can write second order neurons. Degeneration of the optic nerve as an end result of damage to axons. So this is the definition. So definition you will write. Next is ophthalmoscopic classification you have to write. And then this etiology you should write. And this clinical features and this part, this table. This much you write, you will get full marks. And differential diagnosis is not that much important. If you write, it is very good. So what is the treatment? There is no treatment. Treat the cause. If it is papilledema, send it to a neurosurgeon. Try to reduce the intracranial tension. So if it is due to some optic neuritis, give IV methylprednisolone. If it is due to glaucoma, treat the glaucoma. If it is retinitis pigmentosa, there is no cause. So depending on the etiology, you treat the cause. So that finishes about optic atrophy. So these were the main topics. All the other things are small topics like night blindness. So night blindness is also known as nyctalopia. So nyctalopia is a scientific term. Night blindness is a common layman's term. In this, the rods are damaged. You have got two types of photoreceptors, rods and cones. Rods help in dim vision and cones help in color vision and bright light vision. So when the rods are damaged, you get nyctalopia. So what are the etiology? It could be vitamin A deficiency. So xerophthalmic fundus, in that you can get night blindness, or retinal degenerations like retinitis pigmentosa or choroideremia, and congenital high myopia. In high myopia also you can get night blindness. So so high myopia is more than 6. So myopia of less than -3 diopters, -3 and below. Less than -3 it is called mild, 3 to 6 it is known as moderate, and more than 6 it is known as high myopia. So more than -6 power, if it is there, it can also lead to some defect in night vision. And congenital stationary night blindness, Oguchi's disease, there are a few diseases. And advanced primary open angle glaucoma. In primary open angle glaucoma, there is a delayed dark adaptation. And peripheral corneal lenticular opacities. So basically in your cataract lessons, you might have learned. So if there is a peripheral lenticular opacity, the patient complains of blurred vision in his night time. So see what happens is, suppose this is the lens. So in lens, suppose there is a central lenticular opacity. Suppose in the center of the lens, there is a lenticular opacity. In daytime, what happens due to bright light, pupil constricts. So suppose there is a central lenticular opacity. Suppose there is a central lenticular opacity like this in this pen. In the pupil is like this. In daytime, what happens is the pupil constricts. So when the pupil constricts, the opacity is in the center. So patient has got a defective vision. So in case of central lenticular opacities, the patient will be having day blindness. That is, in daytime or in bright light, it is difficult for him to see. The vision is less. Similarly, if the opacities are in the periphery, then what happens is, in daytime when the pupil constricts, the vision is normal. But in the night time when the pupil dilates, this opacity falls in the pathway of the light, thereby causing scattering of the light and leading to night blindness. So peripheral corneal opacities and peripheral lenticular opacities. So in cornea also same like that only. So if peripheral corneal or lenticular opacities, there will be night blindness, because in night time the pupil dilates. When the pupil dilates, the part of the lens which has an opacity, initially it was covered by the constricted pupil, but now it gets exposed to light and thereby causes scattering of the light and blurring of vision. So peripheral corneal and lenticular opacities or cortical cataract usually causes night blindness, whereas a nuclear cataract usually causes day blindness. Okay, so day blindness, the technical term is hamarlopia. It is a good vision in dim light. It is a disorder of the cones. It could be due to congenital diseases like congenital deficiency of cones or Stargardt's disease, or it could be due to central corneal and lenticular opacities. I told you, in central opacity, in daytime the pupil constricts. When the pupil constricts, the central lenticular opacity obstructs the vision. And as the pupil constricts, initially when the pupil was dilated, some light was going to the periphery. But now as the pupil constricted, there is no light going into the eyeball. So the patient complains of day blindness. So the difference they'll be asking you in your practical exams. Similarly, color vision defects. So what are this color blindness? You might have all come across this color blindness. They usually use for pilots or in railway employees and all. They use this color vision defects. So what is normal color vision? The normal person is trichromate. That is red, green and blue. These are called as primary colors. So primary colors are 3: red, green and blue. So any individual, any normal person is able to see all these primary colors, red, green and blue. So he is known as a trichromate. So trichromate is a normal person able to see all the 3 colors. So now there are secondary colors, that is magenta, cyan and yellow. Magenta, cyan, CYAN, cyan and yellow. So they are the secondary colors which are formed due to mixture of this red, green and blue. So normal person is trichromate. He is able to see red color, green color and blue color. And if it is a color vision defect is there will be 2 types of conditions. One is anomalous anomaly, that is defective color vision. Other is anopia. So what is this? So normally a person is trichromate. He is able to see all the 3 colors, red, green and blue. In color vision defects can be 2 types, anopia or anomaly. So in anopia, what happens is absent color vision. So completely the person is unable to see one color. So if he is unable to see red, he is called protanopia. If he is unable to see green, he is known as deuteranopia. If he is unable to see blue, he is called tritanopia. So anopia means complete absence of color vision. That is completely unable to detect one color. That is known as anopia. Whereas anomaly means he is able to detect the colors, but for red he will be saying green, for green he will be saying blue, for blue he will be saying red. That is known as anomaly. So basically color vision defects are of 2 types. One is anopia, the other is anomaly. This is not for exam check, this is just for your information because you have to know about it. So in anopia, what happens is completely he doesn't understand that doesn't detect red color, green color, or blue color, any one color. Anomaly means is able to detect, but he falsely identifies. That is, for green he will say as red, or for red he will say as green. That is known as anomaly. Hope that difference is clear. And it could be congenital or acquired. It could be congenital defect or acquired defect. So congenital color blindness, it is X-linked recessive. It is seen in males. Females will be the carriers. It could be two types: dyschromatopsia, achromatopsia. So achromatopsia means completely is unable to detect one particular color. So either he is red blind, green blind, or blue blind. He is completely unable to see that color. Dyschromatopsia means he is able to see all the three colors, but he wrongly identifies red as green, green as blue, like that. So that is dyschromatopsia. Okay. So first of all, what is this dyschromatopsia? Also known as color confusion. So color confusion means, I told you, for red he'll be telling green, for green he'll be telling blue. So he'll be confused. He's able to recognize all the three colors, but he doesn't know which color is which one, which is red, which is green. So anomalous trichromacy. So what does this mean is one or two color identification mechanism if defective. That is, the mechanisms to identify all the three colors are present, but one or two mechanisms are defective. So protanomalous means red appreciation is defective. So here again to clear, so this is a color confusion. Color confusion means the person can recognize all the three colors, red, green, and blue, but one particular color he is confused about that. So if you show him a red pen, he might be telling it to be green. If you show some other object, green color object, he might be telling it to be red. So he's not perfect in identifying. He can identify all the three colors, red, green, and blue, but he's not perfect in that. He's confused. He says red for green, green for blue, like that he says. Why? Because here the color identification mechanism for that particular color is anomalous. Suppose red color is able to identify, but the mechanism is defective. So even slight greenish tinge is present also, he will tell it as red instead of green. So if that red appreciation defect is present, it is called protanomaly or protanomalous. Green defect is called as deuteranomalous, and blue defect is known as tritonomalous. Hope you are clear. And then dichromatic color vision. And in dichromatic color vision, what happens is ability to perceive one color is totally absent. So here what I told you is trichromacy. Trichromacy means is able to identify all the three colors, but one or two colors he confuses or he mistakes in identification. But all the three colors, he is trichromate, able to identify all three colors, but in different proportions. He is getting confused. But here in dichromatic, what happens is one color is totally absent. Protanopia means completely red color is unable to detect. Deuteranopia means completely green color is unable to identify. Tritonopia means completely blue color is unable to identify. So dichromatic color vision means ability to perceive one color is totally absent. Protanopia, deuteranopia, and tritonopia. Okay. So red-green in this out of all these proportions, red-green deficiency is more common than blue. So the most common thing which we see in our daily practice is red-green deficiency. So if you take about 100 patients, almost so many of them, nearly 60 to 70 of them will be red-green deficiency. Very rarely you will be seeing blue color deficiency in your clinical practice. That is, protanomaly and deuteranomaly are more common than tritonomaly. That is red and defective identification and green defective identification. Blue cone monochromatism can also be seen in some patients. Complete absence of red and green. So in blue cone monochromatism, the patient completely cannot see red and green color. Everything will be appearing blue for this patient, but this is very rare. The most common color vision defect you'll be seeing is red-green deficiency. So achromatopsia. And I told you trichromacy, anomalous trichromacy, all the three colors he can identify, but he's confused. Which one is red, which one is green. Dichromate, one color is totally absent. Other two colors only he can see. Similarly, blue cone monochromatism. Monochromatic means only one color he will be seeing. Similarly, there is a condition called achromatopsia. It is a very rare thing. Here, cones are totally absent. Only rods are present. There is total color deficiency. So everything will be appearing black and white for this patient. But this is a very, very, very rare condition. I have never seen a case of achromatopsia till now. And we have to see whether it is mentioned in literature or not. We have to see. So what is acquired color blindness? So they were the congenital. And what could be the acquired causes? So most, is the internet connection stable? Here it is showing unstable. Hope it is, okay, now it is gone. So they were the causes of congenital color blindness, that is X-linked recessive. And there is acquired color blindness. Acquired color blindness means there is a condition called central serous chorioretinopathy. In this condition, blue-yellow defect will be seen. Similarly, ethambutol amblyopia. I told you ethambutol is a drug which we give for treating tuberculosis. So when you start ethambutol, there might be again blue-yellow color vision defect can be seen in case of ethambutol toxicity. Similarly, in optic nerve lesions, optic neuritis, I told you there will be red desaturation. So the patient will be identifying the red color as slightly pale red in color. That is, red desaturation will be identified. So in optic nerve lesions like optic neuritis papilledema, there will be red-green defect will be seen, especially red color desaturation will be seen. Similarly, lenticular sclerosis, that is in cataract, acquired blue color defect, because lens is a strong filter of ultraviolet light and blue color light. So when the lens gets sclerosed, there is a blue color deficiency is seen, acquired blue defect. So these are the causes of acquired color blindness: central serous retinopathy, ethambutol toxicity, optic nerve lesions, and lenticular sclerosis or your cataracts. So what are the tests for color vision? It could be Ishihara's charts, very famous, pseudo-isochromatic charts, Eldridge Green Lantern. Pseudo-isochromatic charts are the other names for Ishihara's charts. Eldridge Green Lantern test, Farnsworth-Munsell. It is not Musnell, it is Munsell's. M-U-N-S-E-L. Sorry for the spelling mistake. Farnsworth-Munsell's 100 hue test and Holmgren's wool test. So what are this? This is your Ishihara's chart. The patient should be able to identify the numbers or should be able to identify the various patterns. So minimum 17 plates. There will be 24 plates in this chart, and it will also vary. Testing schemes vary. So usually the most common one we follow has got 24 plates. Out of 24, at least some 17 plates he has to identify. So that is Ishihara's charts. So in Ishihara's charts, he'll be identifying these numbers and sequences. This is the Eldridge Green Lantern test. Here small light of different colors will be projected. It will be used by railway personnel, by railway department to screen for the loco pilots and all. And this is a Holmgren's wool test. Here we give, here the pairs of wool. So to the patient, we give this blue color wool and we ask him to search a similar color wool from this particular case. In this box, all colors of wool will be placed. We give one color of wool to the patient and we ask the patient to pick up a similar color of wool from the box. So that helps us to know whether the patient is able to match the color or not. If he matches the same color, his color vision is good. If he matches a different color, then there is something defect in his color vision. Similarly, this is a Farnsworth-Munsell 100 hue test. Here there will be colors of varying saturation. So here you see, this is green color, dark green, light green, still light green, finally yellow. In yellow, dark yellow, light yellow. Similarly in blue, dark blue, light blue. Like that, the color will be gradually changing from green to pink. So we jumble all these things and we ask the patient to arrange all these things in an order of ascending or descending intensity of colors. That is gradually from green to yellow, yellow to blue. Like this, we ask him to arrange. If he is able to arrange all of them in a correct order, his color vision is good. Or if he is unable to arrange them correctly, based on the number of wrongs are there, we score it, and based on the score, we tell him how much defect of color vision he has got. It is a very complex test to understand. You just remember the names. So I see Ishihara's charts, Eldridge Green Lantern test, Farnsworth-Munsell 100 hue test, and Holmgren's wool test. So these are the various. This is Ishihara's chart. This is Eldridge Green Lantern. This is Holmgren's wool. And this is Farnsworth-Munsell 100 hue test. So these are the various tests employed to detect color vision defects. So next, coming to a few more small topics. What is this amaurosis? Amaurosis fugax, I told you. This is complete loss of sight in one or both eyes in absence of ophthalmoscopic features. So when you see the eyeball externally, the eyeball is completely normal. And when you see with an ophthalmoscope, when you examine the interior of the eyeball, there will be no pathology. The entire eyeball will be looking normal. But there is complete loss of sight. There is complete loss of vision in one eye or both eyes. But the eyeball structurally, anatomically looks normal. That is known as amaurosis. Amaurosis means structurally normal eye, but there is loss of vision, complete loss. So you have to remember this point is very important. Complete loss is amaurosis. Same definition with partial loss, it is amblyopia. So amblyopia, I told you in your squint classes. So when there is no anomaly, when there is no structural anomaly in the eyeball or the visual apparatus, if there is complete loss of vision, it is called amaurosis. If there is a partial loss of vision, it is called as amblyopia. And in that amaurosis, this is a 2 marks question, very important. They'll be asking you, what is amaurosis fugax? So amaurosis fugax means it is a sudden, temporary and painless monocular vision loss. So it is a painless loss of vision, which is sudden and temporary in one eye due to transient failure of retinal circulation. So the retinal circulation is by ophthalmic artery, the central retinal artery, and all these branches are there. So amaurosis fugax means it is sudden, temporary and painless. It is a sudden loss of vision, which is temporary, only lasting for a brief period of time, within few seconds or few minutes, and it is painless monocular vision due to transient failure of retinal circulation. So why the retinal circulation fails? It can be due to carotid artery occlusion, transient ischemic attacks. So any elderly patient, suppose any obese person who is elderly or who is having some cardiac problem or who is very obese, if he comes to you and says, suddenly I'm having blackouts. So suddenly my eye is going blind, my vision is coming down, and again it is improving within a few seconds, then always make sure that you refer the person to a cardiologist, because amaurosis fugax, it is an indicator of a very serious underlying disease. So if the patient has got some infective endocarditis with dislodging vegetations, or is having some high cholesterol and cholesterol plaques and emboli, or is having some thromboembolic disorders, or if there is any plaques in the carotid artery. So in those cases, any patient who is very aged, elderly patient, or even a young patient who is little obese and known case of some cardiac anomaly, or if he suddenly says that I have a transient loss of vision, totally my vision is lost, and again within few seconds or minutes it is coming, then you always suspect, you would make a diagnosis of amaurosis fugax, and always better to send the patient for a cardiology evaluation. They will be doing a 2D echo, ECG, and if possible a carotid artery Doppler, and they will be ruling out all other causes. So carotid artery occlusion is one of the common cause. Others will be retinal emboli. Retinal emboli can again be due to the same causes, infective endocarditis, carotid artery plaques, etc. It can also be seen in papilledema, giant cell arteritis, Raynaud's disease, and migraine. So these are little okay type of condition. These are not that serious, but carotid artery occlusion is indeed a serious condition, and retinal emboli are a serious condition which need a prompt cardiac evaluation. Papilledema, again, you know the causes, you will evaluate it, and based on that, you will send it to a neurologist or a neurosurgeon. Giant cell arteritis, I told you, and Raynaud's disease, you'll be reading about this in your general surgery. Migraine, you'll be reading in your general medicine. Okay. And then amaurosis fugax. In amaurosis fugax, what happens is a curtain descends. So there is a black curtain. So the black curtain descends or ascends. So a black color visual field. So the vision is totally lost. So how it is lost is a curtain falls from above. Gradually, a curtain falls from above, and totally the vision is lost. It can fall from above, or the black color of vision, loss of vision curtain can ascend from above. And it goes back in the same order. Suppose the vision loss is occurred in this way from up to down. Gradually, it will resolve in the same way. The curtain will again gradually lift up. So that is like patient says that like a curtain, the vision is gradually falling. That is what the patient says. So lower or upper half of visual field can be affected. Anything. It usually 2 to 5 minutes will be the duration of attack, and results in the reverse pattern of occurrence. Suppose the vision loss is from up to down, the recovery will be from down to up. That is how it recovers. And fundus may be normal. Initial stages, fundus will be normal because it is only the retinal circulation which is reduced, and you can initially see few retinal emboli. Okay, small retinal emboli may be seen in some cases, and there is no residual visual defect. Again, the vision comes to normal. That is the problem. If the vision defect is persistent, the patient will go to a doctor, at least to an ophthalmologist. But here the patient won't be having any residual visual defect. That's the patient thinks that it is normal due to some fall in blood pressure or something. So he might be having some underlying coronary artery disease, which could land him in trouble. That's why any patient of amaurosis fugax, always better to get a CVS examination done. So similarly, amblyopia. So I told you, if it is a complete loss of vision without any anatomical abnormality, it is amaurosis. So if it is a partial loss of vision in one eye or both eyes, in the absence of any anatomic ophthalmoscopic abnormalities, it is called amblyopia. It could be congenital or acquired. Acquired could be toxic amblyopia. Amblyopia we dealt it in detail in squint classes. So it could be functional amblyopia, that is anisometropic strabismic stimulus deprivation. For example, congenital cataract, as we read in our squint classes. Similarly, visual cortex disease like functional amblyopia. So this is about functional amblyopia. That's it, nothing more than that. And next, coming to an entity, cortical blindness. So what is this cortical blindness? If suppose the occipital cortex, area 17 and 18, 19, striate, peristriate, and parastriate cortex are involved, due to vascular injury, head injury, or tumors, there can be loss of vision. That is known as cortical blindness. And similarly, malingering. Malingering, I told you in my previous class. So the person has got some selfish motive, or he has got some secondary compensation or secondary gain. Like he wants some handicapper certificate, or he wants to bunk his classes, or he doesn't want to go to an exam, or he doesn't want to attend a duty. So he malingers, says that he has got some abdominal pain, he has got some visual defect, etc. So person behaves to be visually defective. In case of ophthalmology, he says his vision is defective. In case of some other causes, he'll be saying stomach pain or something. So malingering, person says that he has some visual defective, but actually his vision is normal. Differential diagnosis for this is amblyopia, cortical blindness, retrobulbar neuritis, rod cone dystrophy, chiasmal tumors. In all these cases, ophthalmoscopically, no abnormality can be detected. That is, anatomically, no lesion can be detected. That's why we should think of malingering in these cases. And similarly, in malingering, there is some compensation. There is some financial motive or gain or handicap certificate, something. Whereas in hysterical blindness, the patient wants attention. I told you malinger is more common in males. Hysteria is more common in females, especially adolescents. In hysteria, adolescents. So here, patients wants attention. There is no motive or gain here. He just wants attention. If someone comes to them and says that, how are you? Why are you feeling bad? Okay, we'll take you to the hospital. He says, I'm absolutely normal. So in hysteria, the patient wants attention. If you give him some time, automatically they will come back. Okay, here sudden bilateral blindness will be there. The patient will say there is bilateral blindness, but in both of hysterical blindness, the patient walks well without hitting objects. Suppose there is a table in front of you. The patient gradually goes from the side of the table, but he doesn't hit it. That itself says that he's hysterical. In case of malingering, he goes and hits the table. He says that he's unable to see, that's why he hits the table and falls down. He does some action. If he does action, it is malingering. If he doesn't do action, in hysteria, he avoids the table and goes from the side. So how to rule out this is pupillary reflexes will be normal and visually evoked potentials are normal in both these cases. Malingering and hysteria. Treatment, psychological support, reassurance, and if possible, a psychiatrist referral. And higher visual function disorders. These are just for completion's sake. So visual agnosia, ability to recognize objects by sight is impaired. So the patient has got a visual acuity. His vision is good. He's able to walk and all, but he's unable to recognize an object. He doesn't say that this is a laptop. If you give him a mobile phone, he is unable to recognize that it is a mobile phone. So like that, it is a visual agnosia. Prosopagnosia, he cannot recognize familiar faces. It can be asked in your PG. What is prosopagnosia? It is a very famous question. So prosopagnosia, unable to recognize familiar faces. Okay, suppose there is some infarct. Suppose there is a head injury. Initially, before the head injury, the patient will be recognizing everything. After the head injury, like in cinemas, they will be showing in your movies. After head injury, the patient will forget everything. He will ask, who are you? For his relatives and also. Prosopagnosia, he can't recognize familiar faces. So object agnosia, he can't name or tell the use of an object. Suppose you show him a pen. He doesn't say that it is a pen. Or if at all he says it is a pen, he's unable to say the uses of that pen. So like it, object agnosia. Alexia, unable to read despite good visual acuity. The visual acuity is good, still he is unable to read. Dyslexia means difficulty in learning or difficulty in reading. Alexia means unable to read, completely unable to read. Agraphia, unable to write. His visual acuity is good, but he's unable to write. Here, illiteracy should be ruled out. If he's an illiterate, of course, he cannot write. If it is a literate, but still he's unable to write, then it is an agraphia. Higher visual function disorders. Those are complex cases which have to be referred to a neurologist or a psychiatrist. And visual hallucinations. Hallucinations means, you know the definition. So there is no stimulus, but the person perceives that there is something. Suppose there is nothing in front of me, but the patient says that there is some person here. Or there is no one has called you by your name, but he says that someone has called me. Like that auditory hallucinations, visual hallucination, tactile hallucinations. No one has ever touched you, but you feel that something is going on your skin. They are visual hallucinations. Like cocaine bugs. If you take cocaine, there will be the hallucination of bugs creeping over your skin. That is a type of tactile hallucination. Similarly, there is nothing in front of you, but the patient says that he's seeing something. So it could be hallucinations can be two types, unformed and formed. So in unformed type, there will be flashes of light. If there's formed hallucination, he'll be seeing objects or faces. If he says that he's able to see a computer in front of him, but actually there is no computer, it is a formed hallucination. If he says there is some flashes of light, it is an unformed hallucination. Similarly, visual illusions. Illusions means distortion in form, size, color of object. In your internet, you might be seeing so many things about illusions. So distortions in form, size, and color of object is known as an illusion. So palinopsia. So there is a condition called palinopsia. Even after the object is gone, the person sees as if the object is present in front of him. That is someone, so some people after death in the house. So suppose there is a death. After their death, there are some people still who are very attached to that person who has died. They'll say that he's still able to see that person sitting in front of him. So that is palinopsia. And optic anesthesia, false orientation of objects in space. That is, some object is located in front of you, but you'll be feeling as if the object is located somewhere here, just like your diplopia. I told you in squint classes, diplopia and confusion, like that, optic anesthesia. Similarly, cerebral dyschromatopsia, disappearance of color. So color vision defect can be due to a cortical anomaly also, cortical function also. Similarly, cerebral diplopia or polyopia. Due to some lesion in occipital cortex, the patient will be seeing 2 objects or 3 objects. And intracranial lesions. So any intracranial lesions or tumors are present. The symptoms could be visual field defects, transient obscurations of vision, TIA, visual acuity reduction, color vision defects, and diplopia can be seen in case of intracranial lesions. And signs will be ptosis. These are all because of nerve palsy, compression of third nerve and fourth nerve. They can cause ptosis, ophthalmoplegia, external ophthalmoplegia, extraocular muscles. That is recti and obliques and LPS can be involved. And internal ophthalmoplegia means sphincter pupilla and dilator pupilla can be involved. Suppose there is some CNS tumor, it can cause pupillary dilatation. Similarly, subconjunctival hemorrhage can be seen. If it is an intracranial bleed, in subconjunctival hemorrhage, if the posterior limit is not seen And if the patient has a history of head injury, you should suspect a intracranial bleed. And pupillary reflex abnormalities, RAPD, Hutchinson's pupil, ARP, all these can be seen in case of intracranial space occupying lesions. Similarly, papilledema, optic atrophy, retrobulbar neuritis, and proptosis also can be seen. Proptosis is forward protrusion of the eye. And similarly, there is a condition called Terson syndrome. What is that? We'll see. It can be a 2 marks question. So Terson syndrome is bilateral intraocular hemorrhages. So in both the eyes, there will be hemorrhages in the eye. It could be intraretinal or subhyaloid, that is beneath the vitreous or inside the vitreous. It could be associated with subarachnoid hemorrhage or due to aneurysmal rupture. If there is any aneurysm in the brain which has ruptured, or if there is a subarachnoid hemorrhage, there can be bilateral intraocular hemorrhages, which can be intraretinal, subhyaloid, vitreous. So this is known as Terson syndrome. And finally, the last slide, there are some demyelinating diseases like multiple sclerosis and Devick's disease. So multiple sclerosis is an idiopathic disease, more common in females, in which there is a patchy discontinuity of myelin sheath. So the myelin sheath which surrounds the CNS, so there's patchy discontinuity of that, leading to impulse conduction problems, thereby leading to weakness and all. So in this, this has got remissions and relapses, and it can present with unilateral optic neuritis. For all the optic neuritis cases, that's why you go for an MRI brain, because there could be an underlying multiple sclerosis for which you have to start steroids, and may have an internal nuclear ophthalmoplegia and cerebellar nystagmus. So internal nuclear ophthalmoplegia is a very separate chapter in itself, a very big one. It is required for PG level, not required for you, but in PG entrance they'll be asking you. But this INO you read in your PG coaching classes. There they'll be explaining it in detail. Here the time is not sufficient to explain INO. Also, if you want in your clinical classes, we can see it separately. So multiple sclerosis is a demyelinating disease, idiopathic, more common in females. The pathology here is discontinuity of myelin sheath. Remissions and relapses are common, can present with optic neuritis, may have internal nuclear ophthalmoplegia and cerebellar nystagmus. There is a similar condition known as Devick's disease, also known as neuromyelitis optica. In here, anti-aquaporin antibodies are present. So these anti-aquaporin antibodies lead to problems in the central nervous system, and thereby leading to this disease. It is more common in females. Here optic neuritis occurs along with ascending myelitis. So myelitis means, remember, it is related to spinal cord. Transverse myelitis is seen in ascending myelitis, Guillain-Barré syndrome, all these have got myelitis. So in Devick's disease, the spinal cord is involved along with optic nerve. So optic neuritis along with inflammation of spinal cord, ascending myelitis. It is known as spinal cord. Ascending means the infection ascends from bottom to up. That is, it starts from sacral or lumbar segments and it comes to the thoracic segments. So optic neuritis with ascending myelitis, spinal cord involvement is Devick's disease. The pathology is anti-aquaporin antibodies. Here no remission and relapses, but as the spinal cord is involved, quadriplegia, all the 4 limbs will be involved, anesthesia will occur. It can present with bilateral optic neuritis, and there are no ocular paralysis and nystagmus. This internal nuclear ophthalmoplegia and nystagmus, which are seen in multiple sclerosis, are absent in Devick's disease. So that was about neuro-ophthalmology in brief. Hope I have covered all the topics. So any doubts you have, you can message. If there are no doubts, we'll be stopping here. So this finishes your neuro-ophthalmology classes. Little interesting one. In neuro-ophthalmology, you'll be having associations with all the departments. You will have some amount of psychiatry, some pulmonology, some general medicine, some general surgery. There's multiple sclerosis, Devick's disease, all are medicine topics. Similarly, that Hutchinson's pupil, intracranial tumors, hemorrhages, Terson syndrome, all these are surgery topics. And similarly, the dithambutyl amblyopia and all these will be your pulmonology topics. And again, methanol amblyopia, again, general medicine. And those higher visual hallucinations, illusions, all this will be your psychiatry. Like this, neuro-ophthalmology has got a relation or interlink with all the different topics. So any doubts you have? And this nystagmus can be related to your ENT, like this. Okay, any doubts? You're messaging. Okay. If no doubts, it's okay. Second internal, I don't know. I'll better ask HOD sir and I'll confirm you. I'll ask, next classes will be taken by Narasimha sir. So I'll ask and find out and inform to sir. So sir will inform you when there will be your second internal. Okay. So no more doubts, I hope. If no more doubts, we'll close it here then. Okay then. Okay. We'll end the neuro-ophthalmology here. Thank you all.